Now, there's been a lot of noise about new Chinese car brands, but makes like MG have been here for years and have firmly established themselves as a top 10 seller. And this is MG's vital new HS midsize SUV. It competes with cars like the Hyundai Tucson, Kia Sportage and the Mazda CX-5. So we've lived with this car now for 3 months, driven more than 2,000 kilometers and spent more than 70 hours behind the wheel. So we can let you know everything you need to know about this car. We are testing the top of the range HS Essence, which is priced at about $41,000 before on-road costs. But potential buyers can grab one now for $40,990 drive away for a limited time. Now, that's a super sharp price for a mid-size family SUV. And there's even cheaper grades within the model range, so you can choose to keep more thousands in your pocket if you want to. And it severely undercuts mainstream rivals from Mazda, Hyundai and Kia. But you will do without some things though. If you want hybrid, you need to look somewhere else. All-wheel drive, forget about it, not in the range. So you have to decide if those things are important to you. Our Essence grade does have a lot of standard features though. It has 19-inch alloy wheels, LED lighting front and back, silver roof rails, spoiler and privacy glass. Inside there are synthetic leather wrapped seats that are power adjustable and heated in the front row. A synthetic leather wrapped steering wheel and a real leather covered gear selector are included. A large 12.3-inch central multimedia screen is paired with a digital driver display of the same size. The Essence has an 8-speaker stereo compared to the 6-speaker unit in the cheaper models. There are plenty of USB-A charging ports up front and a wireless device charger in the center console. Wired Android Auto and Apple CarPlay smartphone mirroring are included too. A big panoramic sunroof lets the light in and opens and closes with the touch of a button. The new HS is much sleeker looking than the previous version, with sharply styled front end and edgy backside with brake lights that run the length of the rear end. There are plenty of panel creases that add a bit of texture to the design. There are 6 color options including metallic red and blue to add a bit of difference to the more conventional white, silver, black and grey. Mid-size SUVs are the most popular vehicles in the nation. This is because they are big enough to hold a family of 5, but not too big as to feel unusable in the city. The HS has a really roomy cabin. There's lots of headspace, shoulder space, and the steering wheel and seats are both adjustable, so you can always find a really comfy seating position. There's also some nice touches like soft touch material here on the dash and some nice little textured inserts on the door. But as you can see, it's got a really clean design on the dash, but that means because they've removed a lot of the buttons here, which means you have to dive into the touchscreen, which can be fiddly when you're on the move, especially just to change the aircon and your audio settings. But one of the big issues I have is that there's a big side mirror here and it blends perfectly into the A-pillar right here. And so what that does, it creates a really big blind spot. So if you're coming up to a pedestrian crossing, intersection or roundabout, it's quite difficult to see what's coming from the right. And you sometimes have to crane your neck to have a look what's going on. There's enough room in the back seat so that my 2-year-old can swing his legs when he's in his seat without smacking the back of the front seat, which is a win for parents. Backseat passengers have their own aircon vents and USB charging points too. There are ISOFIX anchor points on the 2 rear window seats and a top tether anchor for the middle seat. On paper, the boot is a reasonable size, but it isn't as usable a shape as some of the others and isn't as practical in everyday life as, say, a Toyota RAV4 or Honda CR-V. The HS is only powered by a 1.5 litre turbocharged petrol engine. It makes 125 kilowatts and 275 newton meters. That's handy outputs for a mid-size family SUV. It's paired with a 7-speed dual clutch auto that drives the front wheels. But the lack of all-wheel drive is a bit of a letdown. MG claims the HS drinks 6.9 litres per 100 kilometres, which is great, but we regularly experience well above that. In mostly city driving, we used about 10.2 litres per 100 kilometres, and on a mix of motorway and city driving, that dropped to 8.8 litres per 100 kilometres when measured at the Bowser, rather than the vehicle's onboard computer. That's not great, and when you factor in it needs premium unleaded petrol, you'll take a fair hit to your monthly finances. Now this new HS takes a big step forward from the last one. Part of that is it's got a really good motor, and there's plenty of power and torque on tap, so it's easy to overtake on the motorway, plus it's pretty composed around town too. Now it's got well sorted suspension as well, and it strikes a really good balance between being quite engaging to drive, but also it soaks up a lot of the bumps and lumps along the way. It's not perfect, sometimes it'll crash over the bigger ones, and it doesn't quite like really consistent small bumps, it becomes a little bit unsettled. But in this class, it drives particularly well. So yeah, it's got really well-weighted steering. It's not too sharp, it's not too slow. It gives pretty good feedback as well, and it's direct, and that gives you a little bit of confidence on the road, especially if it's a tight, twisting road. You kind of know what the car's doing, which is great. The pedals are also, they've got a really nice feel to them. There's not a lot of woodiness or sponginess you might get in some other models, but you know exactly what this car is doing at all times, which is perfect. There are some concerns about the dual clutch auto though. It's not the slickest unit on the market. And there's a fair bit of delay sometimes when you're trying to cross an intersection, which means you just have to give yourself more time. Think of it as just feathering the throttle rather than putting your foot down like you would in a usual automatic car. Like I said earlier, there's a lot of visibility issues here to the right thanks to this giant mirror that blends into the pillar. And that can cause issues when you're driving around town, especially in busy pedestrian areas where you need to really see what's happening over here. It's pretty quiet on the road too, and the reason for that is MG has put a heap of sound deadening underneath the bonnet, which means it keeps pretty much the outside world at bay. You don't hear the engine very much, you don't hear the tyre noise either. It's a big step forward for MG, which didn't have that really sound deadening material in the earlier models. Now for now you've only got the petrol engine, which is fine, but MG has said they're going to bring in a plug-in hybrid version in the future, which will dramatically cut fuel bills and sort of be a little bit more responsive when you drive because it'll have that electric motor to give you a little bit more oomph as well. Not that this car's underpowered, but a little bit extra go, especially off the mark, is always appreciated. So as I mentioned earlier, one of the big letdowns is the lack of all-wheel drive. I mean, for families, they like that extra safety that all-wheel drive system brings, especially in the wet weather. And while this MG is pretty composed, you can get a bit of tyre spin when you're really trying to accelerate in slippery and wet conditions, and that can upset a few drivers, I think. So I think one of the areas that MG has really advanced this HS is that it is actually fun to drive. It has excellent body control, like I said, because of that suspension that's been upgraded, so it's a little bit firmer than the old one. And that means it holds its weight through the corners. You know, it feels more composed, you have more confidence in the car and what it's doing when you're driving on a twisty turning country road. And that's a nice thing for a family SUV. It doesn't have to be boring all the time. It can be a little bit of fun. A little bit of safe fun is what you really want. And being a mid-size SUV, it's quite practical around town, so it never feels too big. It's easy to park, easy to get into underground car parks, especially some of those older ones where it's tight and low. You never really feel stressed out when driving into those things. It's also got plenty of parking aids, so that top-down view camera, all the parking sensors make it really easy to park. You never have to worry. And it's actually quite a clear image as well, while some manufacturers have sort of older, sort of lower res cameras. This one's quite sharp, and you notice that quite a lot when you're trying to park, and that, it makes it a fair bit easier. One of the things about this car that is a little bit annoying is the safety tech. It's not the best calibrated out there. So it'll often misread speed signs, and so the car will beep at you for no apparent reason. So you'll be getting school zones 24/7, 7 days a week. Also, the driver attention warning is a little bit of a nuisance. There's this camera right here that looks at you and tells you when you're not paying attention to the road ahead. But the problem is, if you scratch your nose, readjust your sunglasses, it's gonna beep at you. Squint your eyes because it's too sunny, you better believe that's a beeping as well. And it often alerts just when you're looking straight ahead as well. So a little bit of work needs to be done on that safety tech to really elevate it up and to challenge the big name players like Toyota and Mazda that are pretty well sorted in that department as well. And so while some of those safety systems don't work particularly well, it doesn't count for all of them. So the lane keep assist is particularly good. It doesn't jump in all the time. It only does it when it's really necessary, and you hardly ever see it because most of the time, if you're paying attention to where you're driving, you're in control. And the auto emergency braking isn't particularly sensitive. So again, it'll only jump in when it's absolutely necessary. While some systems can detect parked cars on the road, I haven't had that issue with this HS so far. The HS had a 5-star safety rating. It had strong results in all categories, but performed very strongly in adult occupant and child occupant protection. It has 7 airbags and a solid list of safety tech. Some of the notable features are auto emergency braking, blind spot warning, a 360-degree camera, and rear cross traffic alert. For a full list of safety equipment, head over to carsguide.com.au for the full written review. Here is where the MG shines. It is covered by a 10-year, 250,000 kilometre warranty, which is the best in the business. It also has a 10-year cap price servicing program, which is relatively pricey at $5,741 over that time. You'll need to pop into your local dealer every 15,000 kilometres or 12 months, which is par for the course. But beware, the 4th and 8th service are particularly expensive at more than $900 and more than $1,600 respectively. The MG HS is perhaps unfairly overlooked in the mid-size SUV segment. It's good looking, has plenty of standard equipment and drives pretty well. Plus that 10-year warranty and low starting price is sure to draw in a lot of buyers. But packaging issues, a less than slick dual clutch auto and annoying safety features muddy the water a little bit. But it's hard to argue with keeping thousands of dollars in your back pocket when shopping for a new family SUV.